So this first slide here, y'all, this was our preseason prediction, right? And I think it's important to bring this up first of all to show that our graphics department has gotten a little bit better. I think the graphics I think on this slide are a little weak, but nonetheless, I mean, look, we were 6 out of 12. We were 6 out of 12. I mean, I feel pretty good about what we put out there. I mean, um, almost had Boise State in there actually over App State. Mark talked me out of it, but I'm not going to hold that against you, Mark. We could have had 7 out of no, but Utah obviously Cam Rising goes out and changed the entire script for them. I think Arizona State would have been a better team regardless of whether Cam Rising played or not. Um, and we had obviously Georgia and Oregon in there, rightfully so. We didn't have Texas in there. I think that the one bad play here is Michigan. Um, Michigan's just been terrible. I don't know what I was thinking having them in there, but I had Michigan beating Texas early. Knowing the issues that Texas had at running back, or the injuries, I should say, that Texas had at running back. I did not think that their defense would be this good. Thought they'd have some holes in the run game that Michigan could exploit. So I had Michigan winning that football game early, and Texas just proved to be a really good team overall. So they kind of get the slot in over Michigan there. Had Tennessee in, which I think some talking heads had Tennessee in there, but no Alabama on our card. And we picked that. We predicted that rightfully. We had Alabama with 3 losses and outside of the college football playoff. That happened to be the case. Texas A&M was really close. If they could have beat Texas at the end of the year, I think that they probably get in some form or fashion. And then Miami, probably the other one that I look at and think, not a bad play necessarily. It's just things. I mean, Miami just did Miami things, in my opinion, and lose to Georgia Tech and just kind of let their season slip through their fingers, and don't even make the ACC championship game. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We still had Miami winning the ACC, right? I mean, that's just like a few weeks ago. and now we don't even talk about them. We don't even mention them. So interesting there, but yeah. And then Ole Miss, I think, is a team. Nobody thinks that Ole Miss isn't capable of winning some games in the playoffs if they were to get in. I think that they are one of the 12 best teams from a power rating perspective. Just lost really a Kentucky game was kind of the one that I just didn't have. I didn't have them losing to Kentucky, and had they won that game, obviously they're in. But yeah, for as crazy of a season as we've seen this year, I feel pretty good about hitting 50%.
We're one of the only shows that's itching to throw up what we had put out there before the season started. I mean, you're not going to see um, ESPN throwing up their preseason brackets and showing you how wrong they were. App State was dumb as hell. That made no sense. Utah. We've learned hard lessons with Cam Rising over and over and over and over again for all 30 years he's been in college football. So we should have known better than that, but we couldn't help ourselves because with him on that team, it definitely looks differently. But I'm with you. The Texas A&M and Michigan ones are the ones that I'm really kicking myself over.
Well, and with A&M, it's really the fact that Connor Wegman was a dud. I mean, I had a lot of hope for him. I thought that we would see the Connor Wegman we saw versus Missouri all season long, and that just wasn't the case.
Let's keep it going. What else you got?
Yeah, and then looking at the first round here, no news here. Graphics department got a little bit of an upgrade, made things a little bit bigger for our visually impaired older viewers, I guess you could say. But yeah, no secrets here. And then based off of our previews and our predictions, we were lined up for the most part on all of these picks. But we've got Tennessee winning, and beating Ohio State, Notre Dame beating Indiana, taking on Georgia, We've got Penn State beating SMU, taking on Boise State, and we've got Texas beating Clemson and taking on Arizona State. Um, I don't really know if you got anything to add to this, Mark. I know you were kind of higher on Ohio State. We kind of middled there. I was a little bit leaning towards Indiana. So we each kind of got a pick there, and I took Tennessee. You took Notre Dame. Um, I would be really interested to see Tennessee's defense against Oregon's offense. I think Oregon's offense is the best in the country right now, and Tennessee out of this group of eight, I think Tennessee has the best defense of the bunch. That would be just a really fun matchup to watch.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these would be some really entertaining matchups, no doubt about it. You know, Texas is, you know, again lucked right up and slipped into that corner over there. Now, I'm not saying Arizona State is a gimme by any means, but um, you know, that was a easier side of the bracket there. Georgia and Texas were both kind of beneficiaries of that. Obviously, Tennessee, Oregon in the hardest corners of that bracket. Boise State, Penn State, I think is a really interesting matchup there. Um, those two styles of offense, I think, and defensively, I think both those teams are pretty good. So that'll be an interesting matchup. I think one that'll be pretty low scoring there, but yeah, I mean, all this makes sense. Now, things could change. Like we said, Ohio State, I think, definitely has a chance to win at home, obviously. But I like where we're at here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the biggest game to me, Ohio State versus Tennessee, as far as, really could go either way. The rest of them, I feel like you're pretty safe picking the favorites in those games to at least win the games outright. But Tennessee and Ohio State's the one where I could see picking the underdog in that one. All right, then you get to the third round, and we've got Georgia over Notre Dame, making it to the semis. We've got Oregon over Tennessee. That offense just kind of outlasts the defense of Tennessee. I have a hard time believing that many teams are going to stop Oregon's offense, which make them an absolute problem, and their defense is very fast, very fast. We saw them. We saw Penn State match up really well against Oregon's defense, but I don't know that many other teams are going to be able to kind of do that throughout this playoff. Um, Texas over Arizona State. No real news there. This is one though that I could see Arizona State coming away with, having an extra week to prepare for Texas. Right, I think Kenny Dillingham is an excellent coach. That's not getting enough talk in the work that he's done with Sam Levitt as a quarterback. On top of obviously the main course there at running back in Cam Scatterboo. I could see them getting something going on the ground, and that's probably the best way to beat Texas is if you're able to get a strong running game going. But I've got Texas. I just think that they've got more dudes, a higher, more talented roster than Arizona State, and sometimes in those matchups when it's that there's such a discrepancy in talent. There's just no way that a team's going to win that game, and to me, that's kind of what happens in the Texas and Arizona State game, and then Penn State over Boise. This is another one where I look at and I think, man, um, Ashton Jeanty is going to be really tough to stop, and my only concern is that I saw um, I saw Maddox Madsen for Boise State really put the ball in harm's way whenever they were forced to throw the football. They're going to be forced to throw the football against Penn State. To me, that's where he makes the mistakes. Penn State's able to capitalize, and they're going to win the football game because of that. I think that Boise State could match up with Penn State from a rushing standpoint and probably outgain Penn State on the ground, but when it comes to passing the football, I've got to give the edge to Drew Aller over Madsen, and I think that he's gonna be able to win them this football game. But I do think it'll be a really good game.
Of all the games of those four games that we're talking about there in that second round, I think Boise State has the best chance to pull off what I presume will be an upset. I don't know what the line will be on that game, but I assume Penn State will probably be favored probably a little bit in that one. Um, I think Boise's got a chance to win that game. I mean, and it depends on which Penn State shows up, and um, I think Boise has got a chance to, if they can come out balanced, which I've seen them do this year. They've won in other ways than with Genty, but the Maddox will obviously Maddox Madsen I'm talking about will obviously have to hit some big plays, but we saw him hit a couple of big ones in that conference championship game. I think it's possible. And not to mention the defensive line for Boise State impressed me a bit. Whenever I watched them in that conference championship game, they were pretty disruptive. Now, UNLV's offensive line ain't the same as Penn State's offensive line. I think we can all agree on that. So we'll see. It'll be a step up in class, but of those games, I feel like Boise's got a chance to win that one. And I just want to, we don't know what's going to go on. We're just doing our best to predict here. And Georgia could lose to Notre Dame, right? If Notre Dame runs the ball successfully, Georgia can lose that football game. There's no doubt about it. Oregon, if they happen to play their worst game of the year, guess what? They're getting beat by Tennessee. And I think, by the way, I think if Tennessee can win that first round matchup and get faced off against Oregon, we saw what Penn State did running the football against Oregon. What do you think Tennessee's going to do? Tennessee can run the football too. So, I could see Tennessee having some success against that Oregon defense. And I think you're right, Mason. I think Oregon's offense more than likely would outlast them. But what if they have one of those days where they're turning the ball over? So there's a lot of ifs and buts here. So just kind of take it with a grain of salt. But all right, what else you got?
All right, then moving on to the championship. So, yeah, just two games to kind of discuss there. We've got Georgia over Penn State. I think it's a good matchup for Georgia going up against Penn State. They've been good at stopping the run. I think that Georgia is going to be able to pass the football in this one. There's a chance that Carson Beck is back at this point, which sounds crazy. But to me, I just man, I don't see. I've seen Georgia get it up for so many games this year in a way that we haven't seen other teams have to do. Georgia had to do it 4 times this year, 5 really if you count the Tech game, and they did it in 3 of those 5. You know what I mean? And really 4 of the 5 because I think that they got up for Alabama. It was just kind of a shootout at the end of the game, but nonetheless, I think Georgia gets up for all these games in the playoffs that they get to play in, and Penn State going up against Georgia's defense. I think it's a bad matchup for them. Penn State is going to rely on a few chunk plays down the field, and Georgia's been able to. They've proven all year long that they're kind of a bend don't break defense. They don't give up 2 or 3 of those chunk plays. We said that Tennessee would have to get 2 or 3 of those chunk plays to beat Georgia, and they couldn't hit them. And I think that the same can be said for Penn State here, and Georgia is going to be able to outlast Penn State, and then Oregon over Texas. This is kind of a tough one because, again, we're talking about an Oregon offense that is very good going up against a Texas defense. I think that matchup's a little bit of a wash, if I'm honest. I don't see that game being very high scoring for the most part. But I look at the other side of the football, and I look at Oregon's defense. As fast as they play, going up against Texas's offense, I think that's where Oregon finds the advantage, and that's why Oregon ends up winning this football game. They just fly around the football on that side of the ball, and we've seen Texas's offense really struggle at times this year, and I think that they struggle against Oregon's defense. Maybe Quinn Ewers throws a couple picks. Maybe we see Arch Manning in this game, but nonetheless, I'm taking the number 1 team in the country to win that football game. And then, Mark, I'll go ahead and tell you, as of right now, I'm leaning towards Oregon to win the national championship because of what we saw with that offense going up against Penn State's defense. And really, the past few weeks since Tez Johnson has come back from injury, I think that this Oregon team has just looked so much better. And he's really sparked this offense. I expect that to continue. And as of right now, I'm picking Oregon to win the national championship. But we know this game's not going to be played for several weeks. We're not going to see this game until close to the end of January. So we got plenty of time, plenty of games to watch. I reserve the right to change my pick, right, when we do the national championship preview. Sure. And for all these games, really, after the first round, we'll see what these teams are doing. But I know you guys want us to kind of give you our take as of right now, as it stands. And right now, I've got Oregon winning the national championship.
My whole thing with this is, I think Oregon's the best team in the country right now. I don't think there's, the defense has got some questions that need to be answered in this playoff. The defense is going to have to step up. I don't think you're going to be able to just gunsling your way to the national championship. I don't think it's that type of offense. I think it's really, really good. It's the best that we've got available this year, but I don't sit and think of this Oregon offense like the 2019 LSU offense or something like that. So I don't know that they're able to just gunsling their way to a national championship. But the thing is with Georgia got set up in a nice spot in this bracket. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's inevitable. Some teams had easier paths than others. We got to see what this Georgia team is all about now, because we talked about it before the show started. Georgia is going to have a different identity on offense with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback if Carson Beck is in fact going to be out the rest of the playoffs. And Mason, everything that I've read, that's what it indicates to me. We're not going to know for sure until the games are played, because everything's pretty tight-lipped for the most part. But it doesn't sound good for Carson Beck. So is Georgia able to install a wrinkle offensively that teams are not going to be able to find on film? That's kind of where I'm at. Let me see this Georgia offense and what it looks like with Gunnar Stockton at the helm. But it's obviously a hit on Georgia's resume or whatever you want to call it whenever you're comparing them to another team to win a national championship. I can't just sit here and say, well, even Georgia with their backup quarterback, they'll beat Oregon. That's Georgia's not that much better than everybody, right? Especially this season. This isn't a 2021 Georgia defense that can just strangle people to death. It's a different style of team that we've got here. Let's see offensively what the new wrinkles are with their running quarterback and how that affects the game. I think Georgia's run game is going to be that much better. It seems like Georgia is kind of transforming more into that Kirby Smart-esque style of wanting to run the football. It seems like they've gotten better as the years went on doing that. And so can Georgia carry that over into the playoffs? I think that's a big question, and it's yet to be answered. And with that being the case, I have to pick Oregon here. I have to be objective and tell you how I really feel. And Georgia's the best thing that Georgia's got going for them, other than the fact that they're one of the most talented teams in the country, which is obvious the way they've recruited. It's a will to win and figuring out ways to win. And Georgia's been really good at that this year. So can they continue that? It seems like they got momentum. Georgia's been playing playoff football since they beat Tennessee earlier in the season. Every week has been win or go home, essentially. And Georgia is undefeated so far in that scenario. Can they keep it going? Everybody's down to their last loss at this point. So playoff football, here we come.